The metallic taste of pennies and stale espresso coated my tongue. A violent jolt snapped my spine straight, like I had just touched a live wire. My lungs expanded, dragging in a ragged, desperate breath of air that tasted sharply of roasted coffee beans and burnt milk. The hiss of an espresso steamer shrieked in my ears, cutting through the dull, thumping bass of the indie pop song playing overhead. I blinked, my vision swimming through a haze of sudden, blinding light. The last thing I remembered was the cold, sterile tiles of my cramped apartment bathroom. I remembered the heavy, suffocating darkness closing in, the finality of a life ruined beyond repair, the absolute silence that comes when you have nothing left to lose and no one left to trust. I remembered the cold plastic of the pill bottle, but I wasn't on the floor. I was sitting in a rickety wooden chair. My hands, which should have been trembling and pale, were resting firmly on a sticky, syrup-stained table. Mia? Earth to Mia. Did you completely zone out on me? The voice sliced through my disorientation like a scalpel. It was a voice I had heard in my nightmares, high-pitched, coated in a thick layer of artificial sweetness and dripping with an entitlement that money couldn't buy, but certainly enabled. I blinked again, the world snapping into terrifyingly sharp focus. Sitting across from me, framed by the hazy afternoon sunlight filtering through the windows of the campus coffee shop, was Chloe Vance. She looked exactly as she had 3 years ago. Her blonde hair was blown out to absolute perfection, cascading over the shoulders of a cream-colored cashmere sweater that cost more than my entire semester's textbook budget. Her manicured fingers were tapping impatiently against the side of her iced matcha latte. And her other hand, her perfectly lotioned, diamond ring-adorned right hand, was hovering in midair, inching slowly across the table, reaching for the small silver USB drive resting right next to my mousepad. My breath caught in my throat. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack my sternum. It was Tuesday, October 14th. I knew that date. I had spent the last 3 years agonizing over it, playing this exact moment on a continuous, torturous loop in my mind. This was the day my life ended. Not physically, but in every way that actually mattered. I stared at the silver drive. Inside that tiny piece of metal was 85 pages of pure, unadulterated blood, sweat, and tears. It was my molecular biology thesis. 2 years of sleepless nights in the lab, missing birthdays, skipping meals, running hundreds of failing protein sequencing algorithms until I finally found the breakthrough. It was my golden ticket. It was the research that was going to secure my PhD funding, lift me out of the crushing debt I was drowning in, and solidify my name in the scientific community. And Chloe, my roommate of 4 years, my supposed best friend, was reaching for it. In my first life, I had reacted to this exact moment with panicked protectiveness. I had snatched the drive off the table, laughing awkwardly, making up some excuse about needing to run a final spell check. I had been so naive. I thought if I just kept it close, my work would be safe. I thought Chloe was just being nosy. I didn't realize that by denying her in the coffee shop, I merely forced her to steal it later. She had waited until I crashed from exhaustion, sneaked into our dorm, copied the files from my laptop, and submitted the entire thesis to the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics under her own name. By the time I found out, it was too late. The publication was pending, her wealthy parents had hired a team of vicious lawyers, and I was the one dragged before the Academic Disciplinary Board, accused of trying to steal from the department's shining star. They had expelled me. They had branded me a fraud. My reputation was completely incinerated, leaving me a ghost in the very field I had dedicated my life to, all because of the girl currently pouting her flawlessly glossed lips at me. "I'm just so behind on my literature review," Chloe whined, pulling her hand back just a fraction as she noticed my intense stare. She weaponized her puppy dog eyes, the same ones she used to get extensions on papers and free drinks at the bar. "You always organize your citations so well, Mia. Your formatting is practically legendary in the department." She leaned in closer, the sickly sweet smell of her vanilla and bergamot perfume washing over me. It took every ounce of my newly resurrected willpower not to gag. "Can I just use your formatting as a template?" she asked, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial, pleading whisper. "I swear I won't copy any of your actual data. I just need a framework. I'm drowning here, and you're so good at this stuff. Please, bestie." Bestie. The word echoed in my mind, ringing with a hollow, sickening irony. I stared into her bright blue eyes, searching for even a flicker of guilt, a micro-expression of the profound betrayal she was currently executing. But there was nothing. Just the hollow, vacant greed of a parasite looking for its next host. Chloe didn't view me as a friend. To her, I was an asset, a stepping stone, a convenient, hard-working peasant whose sole purpose was to pave the way for her continued unearned success. The universe had ripped me out of my tragic ending and violently shoved me back into the driver's seat. It was a miracle I still couldn't fully comprehend. A supernatural reset button slapped right in the middle of my lowest moment. But as the initial shock began to recede, it was replaced by something else. Something dark, heavy, and infinitely powerful. Rage. Cold, calculating, absolute rage. I could feel the frantic, terrified girl I used to be dying right here in this rickety wooden chair. The girl who always said sorry when someone bumped into her. The girl who let Chloe borrow her clothes and never asked for them back. The girl who thought hard work and playing by the rules was enough to protect her. She was gone. Replaced by a woman who knew exactly what the bottom of the abyss looked like, because the girl sitting across from her had pushed her into it. I wasn't going to snatch the drive away this time. I wasn't going to hide my laptop or try to lock my files or run to the department head in a panic. That was defense. That was the strategy of prey. And I was done being prey. If Chloe wanted to play the thief, I would let her. But this time, I wasn't going to just let her steal my work. I was going to hand-deliver her the rope she would use to hang her own academic career. I forced my facial muscles to relax. I smoothed out the hard lines of my jaw, erased the lethal glare from my eyes, and summoned the absolute brightest, most vacantly cheerful smile I could muster. "Oh my gosh, Chloe, of course!" I chirped, my voice sounding disgustingly identical to the naive, eager-to-please tone I used to use with her. Chloe blinked, clearly taken aback by how easy it was. She had expected a fight, a polite refusal, or at least a moment of hesitation. "Really?" "Really," I said, reaching out. But instead of pulling the silver USB drive toward me, I flicked it gently across the sticky table. It slid with a soft clack, coming to a stop right against the condensation of her iced latte. "Take it," I said, leaning forward, resting my chin on my hands. "Honestly, take the whole file. Take the drive back to the dorm. Use whatever you need. The formatting, the structural layout, the citation style. We're besties, right? Your success is my success." Chloe's eyes practically dilated with predatory glee. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw the raw, unadulterated avarice underneath. Her hand shot out, her fingers wrapping around the small metal drive as tightly as a vulture gripping a fresh bone. She quickly dropped it into her designer tote bag like she was afraid I might suddenly change my mind and ask for it back. "Mia, you are an absolute lifesaver," she gushed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Her skin was soft, uncalloused, the hands of someone who had never had to work for a single thing in her miserable, pampered life. "Seriously, I owe you my life. I was going to have a full-blown panic attack tonight if I didn't get this sorted." "Don't even mention it," I replied, squeezing her hand back just a fraction too hard. "What are friends for?" "I'm going to head back to the dorm right now and get started," she said, already standing up, slinging her bag over her shoulder. She was buzzing with nervous energy, practically vibrating with the thrill of her successful heist. She didn't want to stay a second longer, probably terrified I'd realize what I had just handed over. "I'll see you at home later. Maybe we can order takeout?" "Sounds perfect. Happy studying, Chloe." "You're the best, Mia," she called out, turning on her heel and practically sprinting out of the coffee shop, the bell above the door jingling merrily in her wake. I sat in the silence of her absence, the chaotic noise of the coffee shop slowly rushing back in to fill the void. I picked up my paper cup and took a slow, deliberate sip of my tepid, bitter latte. It tasted like absolute victory. She had taken the bait. She had swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. In my first life, I hadn't realized Chloe was a snake until the venom was already in my veins. I hadn't known she possessed the sheer audacity to steal a fully completed thesis, strip my name from it, and present it to the world as her own genius. I had vastly underestimated her laziness, her arrogance, and her absolute desperation to impress her overbearing parents at any cost. But with the gift of rebirth came the ultimate hidden edge: hindsight. I knew exactly what she was going to do. I knew she wasn't going to just use my formatting. She was going to open that document tonight, stare at the 85 pages of groundbreaking research, and realize she could never produce anything even remotely close to it. She was going to delete the name Mia Harper from the title page, replace it with Chloe Vance, and submit it directly to the most prestigious journal in our field to secure her spot in the elite PhD program. She thought she had just walked away with the keys to the kingdom. She thought I was the same pathetic, trusting sidekick I had always been. What Chloe didn't know, what she couldn't possibly fathom as she skipped back to our dorm to steal my future, was that I had awakened in this timeline 2 weeks ago. Not today. I had woken up 14 days prior, screaming on the floor of my bedroom, terrified and confused. And once I realized what had happened, once the timeline solidified in my mind, I didn't waste a single second. I didn't confront her. I didn't change my routine. I played my part flawlessly. But in the shadows during those 2 weeks, I had already set the board. The file on that silver flash drive was not my thesis. Not really. It looked like it. It read like it. The abstract was brilliant, the literature review was flawless, and the methodology was sound. But it was a perfectly engineered radioactive trap. I smiled, tracing the condensation ring left behind by Chloe's glass. Let her have her moment. Let her format the stolen document. Let her strut around campus wearing my brilliance like a borrowed coat. She was going to submit that file, and when she did, she was going to trigger a detonation so spectacular it would wipe her name from the annals of academia forever. I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked out into the crisp autumn air. For the first time in 3 years, I could finally breathe. The game had officially begun, and this time, I was the one holding all the cards. The autumn air on campus was crisp, carrying the faint, earthy scent of decaying leaves and distant wood smoke. It was the kind of idyllic collegiate afternoon they print on university brochures. Students were laughing on the quad, tossing frisbees, stressing over midterms, completely oblivious to the fact that I was a walking ghost. As I made my way back to the dorm, my boots crunching rhythmically against the gravel path, I couldn't stop my mind from drifting back to the dark, suffocating abyss of my first life. It was a reflex I was still trying to unlearn. When you die a miserable, broken death, the ghost of it clings to your skin. In the original timeline, my descent into hell hadn't started with a dramatic explosion. It started with an email. I remember the exact moment it arrived in my inbox. I was sitting at my desk, rubbing my bloodshot eyes. Having just finished compiling the final bibliography for my thesis, I had clicked refresh on my email client, expecting a mundane department update. Instead, there was a message from the automated submission portal of the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics. I hadn't submitted anything yet. Frowning, I opened it, my heart doing a strange, fluttering skip as I read the text. It was a rejection letter. But not just a rejection, it was a formal notification of a severe academic integrity violation. The email stated that my manuscript, titled Ribosomal Adaptation in Stressed Cellular Environments, had been flagged for a 99.8% similarity match with a paper submitted 3 days prior by a Miss Chloe Vance. At first, I thought it was a clerical error, a glitch in the matrix. I remember running down the hall to Chloe's room, my laptop clutched to my chest, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I burst through her door, expecting her to laugh, expecting her to help me sort out this bizarre administrative mix-up. Instead, I found her packing a monogrammed leather weekender bag. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. When I showed her the screen, pleading with her to tell the journal there had been a mistake, she had just sighed. That same heavy put-upon sigh she used when the barista got her latte order wrong. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mia, you need to stop. We both know you've been struggling, but trying to steal my work and then blaming me, it's pathetic. I've already informed the dean." The ground had dropped out from beneath me. The sheer, unfathomable audacity of it left me completely paralyzed. She had stolen my drive while I was asleep, copied my files, submitted them, and then preemptively reported me to the faculty to cover her tracks. The disciplinary hearing that followed was a masterclass in wealth and privilege, utterly annihilating hard work and truth. It was held in a claustrophobic, windowless conference room in the administrative building. I sat alone on one side of a long mahogany table, my hands trembling so violently I had to hide them under my thighs. I had no evidence. I had no money for a lawyer. My defense consisted of my messy lab notebooks and my own desperate, tearful pleas. Across from me sat Chloe. She didn't come alone. She was flanked by 2 slick, terrifyingly calm corporate attorneys her father kept on retainer. She wore a modest, conservative cardigan, her hair pulled back, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. She played the victim with Oscar-worthy precision. She spun a tragic tale of how I had become obsessed with her success, how I was drowning in my coursework and, in a fit of desperate jealousy, copied the files from her unlocked laptop. The faculty committee, including Dr. Eris, our department head, swallowed every single word. Why wouldn't they? Chloe Vance was the daughter of a major university donor. I was a scholarship kid from a zip code they wouldn't dare drive through after dark. I was a liability. She was an endowment waiting to happen. The lawyers dismantled me. They twisted my words, questioned my mental stability, and pointed to Chloe's perfectly fabricated timestamp logs. Logs she had manipulated using an expensive software her attorneys likely provided. When Dr. Eris delivered the verdict, his eyes were full of a pity that made me want to vomit. "Mia, given the overwhelming evidence of malicious academic fraud, the committee has no choice but to expel you, effective immediately. Your scholarship is revoked, and a permanent mark of academic dishonesty will be placed on your transcripts. It was a total, absolute execution. They gave me 24 hours to vacate the dorm. I remember the paralyzing numbness that washed over me as I packed my things into garbage bags because I couldn't afford boxes. I remember Chloe watching me from her pristine side of the room, sipping a sparkling water, a tiny, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had stolen my entire future just so she wouldn't have to spend her weekends in the library, and it hadn't cost her a single ounce of sleep. The aftermath was a rapid, brutal freefall. With an expulsion for academic fraud on my record, I was radioactive. I was blacklisted from every research laboratory, every internship, and every graduate program in the country. The massive student loans I had taken out became immediately due since I was no longer enrolled. I moved into a damp, roach-infested studio apartment on the edge of the city, working double shifts washing dishes at a diner just to keep the lights on. I tried to fight back. I sent emails to independent researchers, tried to recreate my data from scratch, tried to find anyone who would listen. But my emails went to spam and my letters went unread. The scientific community is small and rumors travel fast. I was the crazy girl who tried to steal from a prodigy. 6 months after the expulsion, the final blow landed. The Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics published the paper. Her paper. I sat on the floor of my freezing apartment, staring at the glowing screen of my battered laptop, reading my own words, my own late-night epiphanies, my own exhaustive data analysis, all neatly packaged under the byline of Chloe Vance. The article was hailed as a breakthrough. She was accepted into a prestigious Ivy League PhD program, fully funded. The injustice of it didn't just break my heart, it broke my mind. It fractured my fundamental belief that the world was fair, that hard work meant something. I was drowning in debt, completely isolated, and stripped of the one thing I loved most in the world. That night, the silence in my apartment was deafening. I walked into the cramped, moldy bathroom. I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror, hollowed cheeks, dark, bruised circles under my eyes, a ghost of a girl who had dared to dream bigger than her bank account allowed. I opened the medicine cabinet. I took out the bottle of painkillers I had stolen from the diner's first aid kit. I didn't cry when I swallowed them. I just felt a profound, exhausting relief that I wouldn't have to fight a losing battle anymore. I lay down on the cold linoleum floor, closed my eyes, and let the heavy, suffocating darkness drag me under. But the universe, in all its twisted, chaotic glory, decided I wasn't finished. It spat me back out. It violently shoved my consciousness back across the timeline, slamming me into my own body 3 months before the end. As I reached the door of my dorm room, the phantom sensation of cold linoleum faded, replaced by the warm, polished wood of the hallway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and pushed the door open. The contrast between my side of the room and Chloe's was a perfect metaphor for our lives. My side was Spartan, highly organized, and functional. A neatly made bed, a desk cluttered with textbooks and color-coded lab notes, and a small thrifted rug. Chloe's side looked like a high-end department store had exploded. Designer clothes were draped over every available surface. Expensive makeup palettes were left open, dusting her vanity with shimmering powders. Empty bottles of imported mineral water and half-eaten gourmet salads littered her desk. She lived in a constant state of chaotic entitlement, fully expecting the world and me to clean up her messes. For 3 years, I had been her unpaid assistant. I had rationalized it as just being a good roommate. When she complained she was too tired to do laundry, I folded her cashmere sweaters. When she was hungover and missed her morning lectures, I gave her my meticulously typed notes. When she needed a coffee but didn't want to stand in line, I fetched it for her. I had bent over backwards to accommodate her, believing that her superficial sweetness was genuine friendship. I was an idiot, but a dead girl learns fast. The door clicked open behind me, and Chloe breezed into the room, her designer tote bag swinging from her shoulder. She was practically vibrating with a manic, giddy energy. The silver flash drive was safely tucked away in her bag, and she looked like a cat that had just swallowed the canary. Ugh, today has been exhausting. She sighed dramatically, dropping her bag onto her messy bed and kicking off her boots. She collapsed onto her mattress, throwing her arm over her eyes. My brain is completely fried. You have no idea how stressful it is trying to maintain a 4.0. I actually have a very good idea, I thought, suppressing a dark, sarcastic chuckle, especially since I'm the one actually doing the work for it. You work too hard, Chloe, I said, my voice dripping with forced sympathy. I walked over to my desk and began unpacking my bag. You really need to take a break. I can't, she whined, peeking at me from under her arm. This literature review is killing me. But seriously, Mia, you saving my life today with that formatting template? You are an angel, a literal angel. Glad I could help. Oh, hey, she said, sitting up suddenly, feigning a look of innocent realization. Since you're up, do you think you could do me a massive favor? My dry cleaning is ready at that place down on 4th Street. If I don't pick it up today, I won't have my blazer for the colloquium on Friday, and I really need to focus on this paper tonight. Could you run and grab it for me? I paused, my hand hovering over a textbook. The sheer nerve of her. She had just stolen my life's work not 20 minutes ago, and now she wanted me to run her errands so she could have more time to plagiarize it. In my past life, I would have said yes. I would have put my coat back on, walked 6 blocks in the autumn chill, and fetched her blazer so she could look perfect while she destroyed me. Of course, I said, turning to give her a bright, vacant smile. Just forward me the confirmation email. I'll head over there in a bit. You're the absolute best, she squealed, falling back onto her pillows. Remind me to buy you a drink this weekend. I owe you big time. You really do, I murmured, turning back to my desk. As she pulled her laptop onto her lap and began digging through her bag for my flash drive, I booted up my own computer. I didn't need to look at her to know what she was doing. I could hear the tiny metallic clink as she plugged the drive in. I could hear the soft clicks of her trackpad as she opened the file. I stared at my screen, watching the cursor blink on a blank document, and allowed myself a moment to revel in the sheer, unadulterated power of my hidden edge. Rebirth wasn't just about knowing the future. It wasn't just a crystal ball that let you dodge incoming traffic. It was about having the time to build a sturdier, deadlier car to run your enemies off the road. When I had woken up on my bedroom floor 14 days ago, gasping for air and clawing at my own throat, the panic had only lasted a few hours. Once I realized the date, late September, a full month before the catastrophic colloquium, the panic evaporated, replaced by a cold, hyper-focused clarity. I didn't confront her. Confrontation is sloppy. If I accused her of planning to steal my thesis, she would just deny it, call me crazy, and find a stealthier way to ruin me. No, if I wanted to survive this, I had to let her commit the crime. But this time I was going to control the crime scene. My first order of business had been securing my intellectual property. The night I woke up in this timeline, I didn't sleep. I stayed up for 48 hours straight, polishing the final, unadulterated version of my research. I didn't just save it to a cloud drive. That was too easy to hack, too easy for expensive lawyers to dispute. Instead, I bypassed the traditional university channels entirely. I took my manuscript and registered it with a secure, time-stamped blockchain registry utilized by digital archivists and copyright lawyers. It created an immutable, undeniable digital footprint proving the document was mine, finalized on a specific date, down to the millisecond. Then, I went a step further. I took the entire completed thesis and uploaded it to an open-access global academic preprint server. It's a digital vault where scientists publish their early findings to establish definitive first authorship before formal peer review. It was out there in the ether, publicly available, fully credited to Mia Harper, cemented into the digital bedrock of the internet 2 full weeks before Chloe even thought about stealing it. But securing my work was only half the plan. Securing my revenge required a weapon, and my hidden edge was knowing exactly what weapon the university was about to unveil. In my first life, the only reason Chloe had gotten away with her theft was because the journal's standard plagiarism software only checked against previously published works in traditional databases. Because I hadn't published yet, her submission went through clean. And when I tried to submit mine a few days later, the system flagged me because her stolen file was already in their internal queue. But things were different now. I possessed highly specific, incredibly damaging knowledge about the university's technological infrastructure. During my disastrous disciplinary hearing in the first timeline, Dr. Aris had offhandedly mentioned the mechanics of how I had been caught. He had boasted about the university's brand new partnership with the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics. They were beta testing a highly aggressive next-generation AI plagiarism scanner. This wasn't a standard rudimentary keyword checker. This was a brutal, real-time algorithmic hunter. This new AI didn't just check formal journals. It crawled the entire internet. It cross-referenced global databases, obscure digital archives, and most importantly, decentralized preprint servers. It was designed to find even a 1% anomaly in data sequencing and flag it immediately. In the first timeline, that machine had been the guillotine that severed my academic career. In this timeline, I was going to use it to chop off Chloe's head. The science department and the journal were keeping the AI rollout a massive secret. They didn't want students trying to find workarounds before it was implemented. The official launch was scheduled for this upcoming Friday, the exact day of the senior colloquium, the exact day Chloe was planning to publicly unveil her research to the faculty. I knew the scanner's parameters, I knew its launch date, and I knew exactly how to feed Chloe into its jaws. The version of the thesis I had left on that silver flash drive was a masterpiece of sabotage. I hadn't changed the text. I hadn't changed the citations. I wanted the AI to catch a 99.8% match to my time-stamped preprint to ensure absolute, undeniable plagiarism. But I needed an insurance policy. I needed something visceral, something visual, something that her lawyers couldn't possibly argue away in a closed-door meeting. That was where Appendix B came in. My research centered on mapping three-dimensional ribosomal proteins using complex coordinate data. To a layman or a lazy thief skimming a document, the data tables in Appendix B just looked like endless columns of numbers, X, Y, and Z axes, millions of data points. Chloe would never bother to check the raw numbers. She didn't understand the underlying mathematics. She just wanted the flashy conclusions. 2 nights ago, while she was at a frat party, I had painstakingly gone into the raw data file on the silver drive and altered the coordinates. I didn't break the formatting. I just shifted the numerical values. If you read the tables, they looked perfectly normal. But if you took those specific numbers and ran them through the standard 3D molecular rendering software used on every computer in the science department, the data points wouldn't fold into a complex protein structure. The coordinates would plot out on a 3-dimensional grid, connecting dot by dot to spell out a very clear, very undeniable message. Stolen by Chloe Vance. I sat at my desk listening to the furious clicking of Chloe's keyboard behind me. She was working fast, likely deleting my title page and slapping her own name across the top. She was probably adjusting the margins, feeling like an absolute genius. She had no idea she was strapping herself to a bomb. "Hey, Mia," Chloe called out, her voice momentarily interrupting my thoughts. I turned my chair around. "Yeah?" "In the methodology section, you mentioned utilizing a secondary fluorescent marker for the cellular stress test. Did you use the GFP or the M-Cherry variant?" She was testing the waters, trying to glean just enough surface-level information to survive a basic Q&A without actually doing the reading. "I used the M-Cherry variant," I lied smoothly, without missing a beat. The real paper, the one on the server, explicitly detailed why M-Cherry failed and why I had to synthesize a custom GFP variant. Let her sound like an idiot if the faculty pressed her on the details. Right, that makes total sense," she nodded, typing furiously. "You're a lifesaver. Seriously, this is going to look so good for my PhD applications. I'm sure the committee will be absolutely blown away by your presentation on Friday." I smiled. "I know, right? My dad even bought me a new blazer for it. Oh, which reminds me, please don't forget the dry cleaning. The place closes at 6. "I won't forget," I promised, turning back to my screen. I pulled up the hidden browser window on my computer. I navigated to the preprint server and logged into my account. There it was, my thesis, staring back at me, safe, secure, and legally mine. The digital timestamp glowed like a beacon in the dark, uploaded September 30th, 14 days ago. The trap was set. The bait had been taken. The countdown clock was ticking, and there was nothing Chloe Vance or her millionaire father could do to stop it. I wasn't just going to survive this colloquium, I was going to turn it into a public execution. I was going to let her stand up in front of the dean, the faculty, and the journal editors, wearing her pristine, freshly dry-cleaned blazer. I was going to let her claim my blood and sweat as her own. And then I was going to trigger the AI scanner and watch her entire world burn to the ground. I glanced at the clock. It was 4:15 p.m. I stood up, grabbing my coat. "All right, I'm heading out to get your dry cleaning, Chloe. Need anything else while I'm out?" She didn't even look up from my stolen data. "Maybe an iced coffee?" "You're the best, Mia." "Anything for you, bestie," I said, walking out the door and letting it click shut behind me. As I walked down the hall, I started to laugh. It was a quiet, dark sound bubbling up from the chest of a girl who had died in a filthy bathroom and crawled back through time to collect a debt. Friday was going to be spectacular. The lecture hall in the science building was an architectural marvel of cold, imposing intimidation. It was designed like a Roman amphitheater, with steep, tiered seating that cascaded down toward a central stage. The acoustics were engineered so that a whisper at the podium could be heard in the very back row, ensuring that every triumph was amplified and every failure was broadcast with crystal clarity. When I pushed through the heavy double doors on Friday afternoon, the air was already thick with a suffocating blend of expensive cologne, nervous sweat, and the sharp scent of dry erase markers. The room was packed. This wasn't just a departmental check-in. This was the proving ground. The first 3 rows were reserved strictly for the VIPs. The Dean of Sciences, a terrifyingly stern man named Dr. Vance, no relation to Chloe, much to her eternal annoyance, sat dead center, flanked by senior faculty members. To his right sat a row of unfamiliar faces, impeccably dressed men and women with the predatory, exhausted eyes of academic publishers. The editorial board of the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics had arrived. I took a seat in the 4th row, right on the aisle. Perfect sightlines, perfect vantage point. A few seats away, Chloe was holding court. She looked like she had just stepped off the cover of a high-end catalog for future Nobel laureates. She was wearing the freshly dry-cleaned navy blazer over a crisp white silk blouse, her blonde hair pinned back in an elegant, effortless clasp. She was laughing, tossing her head back, surrounded by her sycophants. She looked radiant. She looked invincible. She looked my way and gave me a little wave, a condescending flutter of her fingers. I smiled back, a small, tight, polite curve of my lips. "Enjoy the view from the top, Chloe," I thought, settling into my hard plastic chair. "The fall is going to break every bone in your body." I glanced down at my phone. The screen glowed with the time. 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes until my embargo lifted on the journal's secure server. 15 minutes until my real thesis flooded the active global database, lying in wait for the AI scanner to sweep its digital nets. Dr. Eris stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone. A harsh shriek of feedback silenced the room instantly. The murmurs died down, cell phones were pocketed, and the collective heart rate of 50 senior science students spiked in unison. "Good afternoon," Dr. Eris began, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Today represents the culmination of your undergraduate careers. You are not here to summarize textbooks. You are here to present original, peer-reviewed level research. We expect rigor. We expect innovation. And we expect absolute academic integrity." He paused, adjusting his glasses, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. For a fraction of a second, his gaze locked onto mine. He gave a microscopic nod, a silent acknowledgement of our private meeting yesterday, a silent promise that he was paying attention. "We will begin," Dr. Eris announced, consulting his clipboard. The first 3 presentations were a blur. A nervous kid named David sweated profusely through a decent but uninspired presentation on soil microbes. A girl named Elena delivered a solid, if slightly derivative, analysis of marine algae. I clapped politely, but my focus was entirely on the clock ticking on my phone screen. 1:58 p.m., 1:59 p.m., 2 p.m. I didn't feel anything physical. There was no grand explosion, no siren. But in the digital ether, a lock had just clicked open. My time-stamped, blockchain-verified thesis dropped seamlessly into the journal's active database. The snare was officially set. "Thank you, Elena," Dr. Eris said, applauding politely as she scurried off the stage. He looked down at his clipboard, his posture straightening ever so slightly. "Next, we have a presentation that I have been particularly anticipating. Miss Chloe Vance, please come to the podium." A hushed murmur rippled through the room. Chloe was a known quantity. Everyone knew her family had money. Everyone knew she skated by on group projects. But suddenly she was the one Dr. Eris was excited to see. Chloe stood up, smoothing the front of her blazer. She exuded a breathtaking, utterly unearned confidence as she walked down the steps. She didn't have notes. She didn't look nervous. Why would she? She was presenting a masterpiece she hadn't lost a single hour of sleep over. She plugged her laptop into the podium's connector cable. The massive projector screen behind her flared to life. There it was. My title. My formatting. Just with a hideous pastel pink background and her name plastered across the center in a bold, arrogant font. Ribosomal Adaptation in Stressed Cellular Environments by Chloe Vance. "Good afternoon, esteemed faculty, members of the editorial board, and fellow peers," Chloe began. Her voice was smooth, practiced, dripping with a faux intellectual gravity that made my stomach churn. "For the past 2 years, I have dedicated myself to understanding how cellular machinery survives catastrophic oxidative stress. Today, I am thrilled to present my independent findings." She clicked to the first slide, my abstract. She began to read, and as she did, a surreal, out-of-body sensation washed over me. I was sitting in a crowded auditorium, listening to my own voice, my own sleepless nights, my own blood and tears echoing out of the mouth of the person who had driven me to suicide in another life. She recited the introduction flawlessly. She didn't stumble. She had clearly rehearsed my words in front of her mirror for hours. She spoke about the failure of traditional M-cherry fluorescent markers with such conviction you would almost believe she knew what a fluorescent marker actually was. As you can see, Chloe said, clicking to a complex graph I had spent 3 weeks formatting. The degradation of the standard markers required me to synthesize a custom hyperstable GFP variant. This allowed me to track the coordinate mapping of the protein folding in real time. In the front row, Dr. Aris leaned forward. He recognized the data. I saw him glance down at the black leather portfolio resting on his lap, the one containing the printouts I had shown him yesterday. He looked back up at Chloe, a slight frown creasing his forehead. He was putting the pieces together, but he wasn't there yet. He just thought she and I had miraculously stumbled onto the exact same genius methodology. Chloe carried on, basking in the rapt attention of the room. The dean was nodding approvingly. The journal editors were taking notes. She was doing it. She was successfully stealing my life in broad daylight, surrounded by witnesses, and they were all clapping for her. In conclusion, Chloe said, her voice swelling with dramatic triumph as she reached my final slide, the data definitively proves that ribosomal adaptation is not a passive decay, but an active, mappable geometric defense mechanism. I submitted this manuscript in its entirety to the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics last night, and I look forward to advancing this research in my doctoral studies. She clicked off the microphone, offering a gracious, humble smile. The room erupted into applause. It wasn't the polite, scattered clapping of the previous students. This was genuine, thunderous acclaim. Her sycophants in the back row were cheering. The dean was smiling broadly. Chloe looked up at the crowd, her eyes scanning the rows, until she found me. She held my gaze for a long, deliberate second. Her smile sharpened into a smirk. It was a look of pure, unadulterated victory. I won, her eyes said. I took it, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. I didn't break eye contact. I just smiled back, a slow, chilling, genuine smile. Keep smiling, Chloe, I thought. Keep smiling for 5 more seconds. Dr. Aris stood up, walking to the edge of the stage, signaling for the applause to die down. The room quieted, eager to hear the department head heap praise onto the star student. An extraordinary presentation, Miss Vance, Dr. Aris said, his voice carrying a strange, tight tension. Truly, the depth of the coordinate mapping is remarkable. Astonishing, even. Thank you, Dr. Aris, Chloe beamed, practically glowing. It was a labor of love. Indeed, Dr. Aris murmured. He turned to face the audience, gesturing to the journal editors sitting in the front row. As many of you know, our department demands the highest caliber of integrity. What you do not know is that, as of this morning, our university has entered into a beta partnership with the Journal of Advanced Cell Dynamics. A murmur of confusion rippled through the students. Chloe tilted her head, her smile faltering just a fraction of an inch. We are piloting a next-generation AI plagiarism portal, Dr. Aris continued, his voice ringing like a bell tolling a death sentence. This is not a standard keyword checker. It is a highly aggressive, real-time algorithmic system that cross-references all global databases, obscure archives, and decentralized preprint servers. To ensure absolute transparency, the dean and the editorial board have requested that we run all live submissions through this portal publicly, right here, right now, as part of the colloquium evaluation. The color drained from Chloe's face so fast she looked like she was going into shock. Her flawless posture crumbled. Her hands, resting on the podium, began to tremble. Of course, she stammered, her voice suddenly thin and reedy. That sounds very thorough. We will begin with your submission, Miss Vance, since it is already pending in the journal's queue, Dr. Aris said. He didn't ask for her permission. He just turned to his own laptop, which was connected to the secondary feed on the massive projector. The screen behind Chloe shifted. Her pink, aesthetically pleasing slides vanished, replaced by the stark, sterile white interface of the journal's back-end system. The logo for the new AI scanner, a stylized, glowing blue eye, pulsed in the center of the screen. The silence in the auditorium was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating silence. Even the students who didn't know what was happening could feel the sudden catastrophic shift in the atmospheric pressure. Dr. Aris typed a few keys. Accessing submission file. Vance ribosomal, adaptation.pdf, initiating global scan. A progress bar appeared on the massive screen. 10%, 20%. I watched Chloe. She was gripping the edges of the podium so hard her knuckles were bone white. She was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open, her chest heaving as she forgot how to breathe. She was praying. She was praying to whatever god of privilege and entitlement she worshipped that the system would just check Wikipedia and standard textbooks. She was praying it wouldn't look too deep. 50%, 70%. Dr. Eris was watching the screen intensely. The journal editors were leaning forward. 90%. The blue progress bar froze. The stylized eye in the center of the screen flashed yellow, then orange, and then, with a jarring digital chime that echoed through the silent hall, the entire screen turned a violent, screaming neon red. A collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the room. On the massive projector behind a petrified Chloe, a warning box had materialized in thick, bold letters. Critical alert, severe intellectual property violation detected. Global similarity. Match. 99.8%. Beneath the warning, the screen split in two. On the left was Chloe's submitted PDF, every single word, chart, and graph highlighted in burning red. On the right was the source document the AI had found. It was my preprint. My name, Mia Harper, was printed in clear, undeniable black text at the top of the right-hand document. Below it, the blockchain timestamp glowed like a radioactive beacon, uploaded to secure decentralized server 14 days prior to current submission. The auditorium exploded. Whispers turned into shouts. People were pointing, craning their necks, their eyes darting wildly between the giant red screen and Chloe, who looked like she had just been struck by lightning. The dean shot out of his chair. His face flushed purple with outrage. Dr. Eris, what is the meaning of this? Is the system malfunctioning? It is not a malfunction, Dean Vance, Dr. Eris said, his voice chillingly calm, though his eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. He looked at the screen, then at the black portfolio on his desk, and finally he looked directly at me sitting in the fourth row. The puzzle pieces slammed together in his brilliant mind. He knew exactly what had happened. The system, Dr. Eris announced, his voice slicing through the chaos, has detected that Miss Vance's submission is a direct word-for-word copy of a highly secure copyrighted manuscript authored by another student in this very room. A manuscript that was digitally archived and timestamped 2 weeks ago. Chloe shattered. The cool, arrogant facade completely disintegrated, leaving behind a frantic, cornered animal. No! She shrieked, her voice cracking, echoing shrilly through the microphone. She backed away from the podium as if it were on fire. No, no, no! That's a lie! It's a glitch! The machine is broken! The blockchain registry does not glitch, Miss Vance, one of the journal editors said, standing up, his tone laced with absolute disgust. It is mathematically immutable. This is the most egregious case of academic fraud I have ever witnessed. I didn't steal it! Chloe screamed, tears of panic and fury spilling over her heavily mascaraed eyelashes, leaving dark, ugly streaks down her cheeks. She looked wildly out into the crowd, desperately searching for a lifeboat, her eyes locked onto mine. In my first life, this was the exact moment she had played the victim. This was the moment she had pointed her finger and ruined my life. She tried to do it again. It was her! Chloe wailed, pointing a shaking accusatory finger directly at me. The entire auditorium whipped their heads around to stare at me. Mia! She's my roommate. She's obsessed with me. She's always been jealous of my grades. She must have hacked into my laptop while I was sleeping, copied my files, and uploaded them to frame me. She set me up. It was a desperate, pathetic lie, but she sold it with hysterical, sobbing conviction. For a fleeting second, I saw doubt flicker in the eyes of the students around me. Hacking was a buzzword they understood. It was an excuse that offered a sliver of plausible deniability. I didn't cower, I didn't cry, I didn't frantically defend myself. I took a slow, deliberate breath. The air in my lungs tasted incredibly sweet. I stood up, I didn't rush. I casually smoothed the front of my jeans, stepped out into the aisle, and walked down the concrete steps toward the stage. I didn't look at Chloe. I looked directly at Dr. Eris. That is a very serious accusation, Chloe, I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it was steady, cold, and projected perfectly into the dead silence of the hall. You're claiming that you wrote every single word of this thesis, yes? You generated the data, you ran the experiments, you mapped the coordinates. Yes, she sobbed, clutching the edges of her blazer. I worked on it for a year. You stole it. If you wrote it, then you must have an intimate understanding of the raw structural data in the appendix, I said smoothly, stopping at the edge of the stage just a few feet away from her. Of course I do. It's my data, she spat venomously. Excellent, I said. I turned to the department head. Dr. Eris, since we are conducting a public evaluation of academic integrity, Would you do me a favor to completely clear up any confusion about who generated this research? What do you propose, Miss Harper? Dr. Eris asked, his eyes locked onto mine. He knew I was about to drop the hammer, and he was completely stepping aside to let me swing it. Could you please open the submitted PDF, Chloe's submitted file, the one she claims I hacked, and scroll down to Appendix B? I asked. Dr. Eris nodded. He minimized the screaming red plagiarism warning and pulled up the raw text of her submitted PDF. He scrolled down past the abstract, past the brilliant methodology she couldn't comprehend, down to the final pages. The screen filled with dense, blocky columns of numbers, thousands of X, Y, and Z coordinates. To the untrained eye, it looked like complex, terrifying math. This is the raw spatial coordinate data for the ribosomal folding, I announced to the room, gesturing to the screen. I looked back at Chloe, who was staring at the numbers with panicked, uncomprehending eyes. Chloe, since this is your data, you know exactly what this maps out, right? It maps the protein structure, she stammered, wiping her nose, trying to sound authoritative. Under oxidative stress, like I just presented. Right. Dr. Eris, your computer is connected to the primary rendering software, correct? PyMOL? It is, Dr. Eris confirmed. Please copy the exact raw data block from Miss Vance's submitted Appendix B, paste it into PyMOL, and run a 3D structural render on the main screen. Chloe froze. A visceral, primal terror suddenly gripped her features. She didn't know what was about to happen, but she finally, utterly realized that she had walked blindly into a trap she couldn't escape. Wait, she gasped, reaching a hand out toward Dr. Eris. No, you don't have to. Rendering now, Dr. Eris said loudly, cutting her off. He highlighted the massive block of numbers, hit copy, and opened the black interface of the rendering software. He pasted the data in and slammed the enter key. The massive projector screen blinked. The software took the tens of thousands of data points that Chloe had stolen from my flash drive, the data points she had sworn in front of the dean and the journal editors that she had meticulously calculated herself, and began to plot them on a three-dimensional grid. Tiny white dots exploded across the black screen, swirling like a galaxy. They didn't form a twisting, elegant ribbon of a protein. They didn't form a cellular structure. The dots snapped together with harsh geometric precision, forming massive, solid, three-dimensional block letters that rotated slowly for the entire auditorium to see. The letters spelled out, "Stolen by Chloe Vance." Someone in the back row actually screamed. A shockwave of absolute, stunned disbelief hit the room so hard it felt physical. Jaws dropped, eyes bulged. The text was undeniable. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a formatting error. It was a digital brand burned directly into the core of the data she had submitted under her own name. Miss Vance, the dean roared, his voice shaking with a rage so profound it echoed off the ceiling. He pointed a trembling finger at the rotating 3D letters. Did your hidden genius calculate those coordinates? Did you map out your own confession? Chloe looked at the screen. She looked at the massive glowing letters spelling her own name, permanently etching her as a thief in front of every person who mattered in her entire world. She didn't try to formulate an excuse. The lie had been completely molecularly dismantled. Her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the stage, hitting the polished wood floor hard, sobbing so violently she couldn't draw breath. It wasn't the pretty, delicate crying she used to manipulate people. It was the ugly, heaving, guttural wails of a narcissist who had just watched their entire fabricated reality shatter into a million irreparable pieces. She curled into a ball on the floor in her ruined designer blazer, weeping uncontrollably. Nobody moved to help her. Her sycophants in the back row were completely silent, staring at her with wide-eyed revulsion. The journal editors looked at her like she was a diseased rat that had scurried across their polished shoes. I stood exactly where I was, looking down at the girl who had killed me. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel remorse. I felt clean. Security, the dean snapped, pulling a walkie-talkie from his belt. I need security in the main science auditorium immediately. We have a student who needs to be escorted off the premises. He turned to Dr. Eris, his face still purple. Suspend her immediately. Initiate a full expulsion hearing before the day is out. I want her off this campus, and I want her blacklisted. It will be done, Dean, Dr. Eris said, his voice cold and professional. He turned his attention away from the sobbing mess on the floor and looked directly at me. The anger in his eyes was gone, replaced by a profound, reverent awe. He had seen the trap. He recognized the sheer, staggering intellect required to not only produce the real postdoctoral level research, but to simultaneously engineer a custom mathematical poison pill that seamlessly exposed a thief. "Miss Harper," Dr. Eris said, his voice carrying clearly over Chloe's pathetic wails, "your real submission, the one on the server. Does it contain the actual mapping of the GFP variant?" "It does, sir," I replied clearly. "Perfectly formatted, uncorrupted, and ready for peer review." Dr. Eris nodded slowly. He looked at the journal editors in the front row, who were all nodding back at him in fervent agreement. "Then I suggest," Dr. Eris said, gesturing to the podium that Chloe had just abandoned, "that you take the stage. I believe this colloquium is eager to hear a presentation from the actual author." I looked down at Chloe one last time. She was clutching her head, rocking back and forth, her life over before it had even truly begun. I stepped over her, walked up to the podium, and plugged in my real flash drive.